Hello dear students, this is Dr. Shabana Begum, Associate Professor in the Department of Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Bangalore, presenting a lecture on the topic Ecological Succession pertaining to BSc Zoology 5th semester under the paper entitled Environmental Biology and Ethology. Students, in my previous lectures, I had discussed about the negative and positive interspecific interactions in the community. So now today I will speak on another interesting topic, that is session 11, that's called ecological succession. Its definition, causes and types of successions like Hydrosere and Xerosere. And the content of this topic being to give a small introduction, definition, causes and types of successions like the Hydrosere and Xerosere. The learning objectives being to learn about the meaning and general pattern of primary and secondary succession, and to evaluate different stages of Hydrosere succession and Xerosere succession. Let me tell you the introduction about this. So, succession means the observed process of change in the species structure of an ecological community over a period of time. In layman term, when one thing is replaced by the other and the process is continued till a final stage is reached, it is called succession. The term succession was first used by Hult in the year 1885, and he was the first to recognize that a relatively large number of pioneer plant communities give way to comparatively small number of relatively stable communities. That's called as climax community. Clemens in the year 1969, while studying the plant communities, defined succession as the natural process by which the same locality becomes successively colonized by different groups or communities of plants. When stripped off of its original vegetation by fire, flood or glaciation, an area of bare ground does not get devoid of plants and animals. Beginning with plants, the area is rapidly colonized by a variety of both plants and animal species that subsequently modify one or more environmental factors. This modification of the environment may in turn allow additional species to become established. The transitional series of communities which develop in a given area are called as sere, S-E-R-E, or seral stages, while the final stable and mature community is called a climax. The development of the community by the action of vegetation on the environment leading to the establishment of new species is termed as succession. It is the universal process of directional change in vegetation during ecological time. It can be recognized by the progressive change in the species composition of the community. Retrogression in community development does not occur unless succession is disturbed or halted by fire, grazing, scraping or erosion. Now let's learn about some of the characteristics of ecological succession. So here ecological succession takes place from arid, that is dry or aquatic environment, and finally leads to mesic environment. During succession, pedogenesis, that is formation of soil, and soil differentiation takes place. The humus content of soil increases and the size of plants gradually increase, which in turn increases the biomass of growing community. The gradually appearing biotic communities have increasing biodiversity, therefore, they become more and more stable. An increase in biodiversity leads gradually from the simple food chain to complex food chain and food web formation. In fact, during this succession, nutrients in the young stage are allocated mostly in the soil, but as cereal advances, nutrients are found in vegetation and less in soil. Niche specialization increases. Different functions are more efficiently performed by specialist species in nature cereal stages than early stages. The role of detritus becomes progressively more and more important. The green chlorophyll pigment go on increasing during the early phase of primary succession. There is a progressive increase in the amount of living biomass and dead organic matter. Increase occur in gross as well as net primary productivity. The life cycle of mature community species are longer and more complex. The relationship among species become more and more mutualistic or helpful, even though there exists enough competition and other activities to prevent invasion of outside elements. Finally, the food chain relationship become more complex as succession proceeds. The entire sequence of stages taking place in ecological succession is called a seer. This can be classified as follows. The first one being Xerosere, where the succession stages are seen in dry area. Hydrosere, where succession stages are found in the water. Lithosere, where succession stages are seen on bare rock. Samosere, where the succession stages are seen on dry sand. Halosere, succession stages are found in the saline water or soil. Then Xerarch is again the succession which take place over a dry area, and Hydrarch is the succession taking place in water bodies. Now let's move on to the factors or processes which influence the ecological succession. So here the general process of succession, you can mention the entire process of primary autotrophic succession is completed through the following sequential steps, that is the nudation, invasion, competition and coaction, reaction and stabilization. What is nudation? So here you can mention nudation is the development of bare area without any form of life. Exposure of new surface may occur due to several causes such as landslide, erosion, deposition, then other catastrophic agencies. These causes of nudation are of three main types. Topographic cause, where due to soil erosion by gravity, water or wind, the existing community may disappear, while the other topographic causes include deposition of sand, landslide, volcanic activity and other factors. Then climatic cause, here the glaciers, dry periods, hailstorms, frost, fire, etc. may also destroy the community. The biotic causes may be man-made. So there may be many forms. The most important biotic factors which are responsible for destruction of forests, grasslands, for industry, housing, agriculture, etc. and other factors are diseases, epidemics due to fungi, viruses, etc., which destroy the whole population. Next, is invasion. So here it is one of the process of succession where the invasion is the successful establishment of a species in bare area. The species actually reaches this new site from any other area. Invasion includes the following three steps: migration, also called dispersal. The seeds, spores, and other propagules of the species reach the bare area, and this process is called migration and is gradually brought about by air, water, wind, etc. Next is called ascesis, that is the establishment. After reaching to new area, the process of successful establishment of the species as a result of adjustment with the conditions prevailing there is known as ascesis. So ascesis is followed by full-scale colonization. In plants, after migration, seeds germinate, seedlings grow, and adults start to reproduce. Next point is the aggregation, where there is colonization by successive offsprings and new migrants help to increase the population, a process called aggregation. Thus, after ascesis, as a result of reproduction, the individuals of the species increase in number and they come close to each other. The plants are autotrophic organisms which are the first to colonize and aggregate are called pioneers. So, the pioneer communities are likely to be more dynamic and have low nutrient requirement and to take minerals in comparatively more complex forms. They are small sized and make less demand from environment. The third factor or the step or process which influence ecological succession is called as competition and coaction. Here, due to aggregation of large number of individuals of the species at the limited place, there develops competition, that is interspecific and intraspecific competition. It's for space and nutrition. So individuals of a species, they affect each other's life in various ways, and this is called as coaction. That is, individuals of a species, they affect each other's life in various ways, and this is called as coaction. The species which fail to compete with other species are ultimately discarded. The reproductive capacity and the ecological amplitude, etc., help the species to withstand the competition. The next step is called reaction, which includes mechanism of the modification of environment through the influence of living organisms on it. So due to this significant stage, changes take place in soil, water, light conditions, temperature, etc. of the environment. As a result of reaction, the environment is modified and becomes unsuitable for the existing community, which sooner or later is replaced by another community, which is called a serial community. The whole sequence of communities that replaces one another in the given area is called a seer, and different communities constituting the seer are called serial stages, which we have already discussed. Finally, it is the step which is the last step called as stabilization or climax. So here there occurs a stage in the process of succession when the final terminal community becomes more or less established for a longer period of time, and it can maintain itself in equilibrium with the climate of that habitat or area. The final community is not replaced and is known as climax community, and the stage is known as climax stage. So you can mention here, as in the slide given, the biotic community established itself in the best way with the environment, which having maximum biodiversity, complex food chain and food web, closed mineral cycling, etc. Now few more points regarding ecological succession. Now let's discuss about the types of succession. So there are various types of ecological succession such as primary succession, secondary succession, then cyclic succession, coral reef ecological succession, autogenic succession, allogenic succession, autotrophic succession, and heterotrophic succession. Now let us learn about them one by one. First being the primary succession. It's also called as a pericere. It occurs in essentially lifeless areas, regions in which the soil is incapable of sustaining life as a result of such factors as the lava flows, newly formed sand dunes, or rocks left from a retreating glacier. For example, the primary succession may take place following the eruption of volcanoes such as those on the Big Island of Hawaii. As lava flows into the ocean, new rock is formed. Here are the few steps of primary succession or pericere, which is very clearly depicted in the diagram. So the soil depths increase due to decomposition of plant matter, and there is a gradual increase of species diversity in the ecosystem, thereby the primary succession occurring over time. So the labels 1 to 7 represent the different stages of primary succession. The first label will designate the bare rocks. The second one, the pioneers, which are in the form of mosses, lichens, algae or fungi. Then there are annual herbaceous plants. The fourth one being perennial herbaceous plants and grasses. Fifth one is the shrubs. Sixth was the shade intolerant trees, and the seventh ones are the shade tolerant trees. So that will become the climax stage. The secondary succession is also called as subsere. It is the series of community changes which take place on a previously colonized but disturbed or damaged habitat. Examples include areas which have been cleared of existing vegetation, such as after tree felling in a woodland, and destructive events such as fires, that is wildfires or forest fires, flooding, windstorms, and human activities. So here again you can find the beautiful designation of the stages of secondary succession in the form of a number of figures or diagrams. So the first one, as indicated here, is an area of growth. The second being a disturbance such as a fire starts over there. The fire destroys the vegetation. The fire leaves behind empty but not destroyed soil. The stress has to be made here because the fire leaves behind empty but not destroyed soil. The grasses and other herbaceous plants grow back first. Then small bushes and trees begin to colonize the public area. The fast growing evergreen trees and bamboo trees develop to their fullest, while shade tolerant trees develop in the understory. The short lived and shade intolerant evergreen trees die as the larger deciduous trees overtop them. So the ecosystem is now back to a similar state to where it began. So these are all the various stages of secondary succession, where ultimately the forest with full of deciduous trees will develop as a community, which is called as a climax community. Now let's learn about the retrogressive succession. So here the retrogressive succession is a succession where the community becomes simplest and contains minimum or fewer species and less biomass over time. Some retrogressive successions are allogenic in nature. For example, the introductions of grazing animals result in degenerated rangeland. In this type of succession, continuous biotic influences have some degenerating influence on the process. Due to destructive effects of organisms, the development of disturbed communities does not occur. The process of succession, instead of progressive, becomes retrogressive. For example, the forest may change to shrubby or grassland community. There is yet another type of succession which is called as coral reef ecological succession. As in all natural environments, the life in a coral reef may change, and that change may follow a pattern of ecological succession. So here the succession may be observed by identifying the species in an environment and by taking a census of them within a given area. You can see the type of coral reef succession in this particular figure, where the corals is the perfect example of both types of succession: primary succession, which occurs as a volcano erupts, and larva, that is here lava, creates a blank slate with no plant life. The coral is deposited and begins to grow on the lava flow. This makes coral an R-selected species because it is the first to colonize. The coral also undergoes secondary succession through the process of spawning, where it stacks new offspring on top of itself and creates a reef. This surface allows other species to live and grow. What is autogenic succession? Here, after the succession has begun, in most of the cases, it is the community itself which, as a result of its actions or reactions with the environment, modifies its own environment and thus causing its own replacement by new communities. This course of succession is known as autogenic succession. It's self-creative. So, allogenic succession, in some cases, the replacement of the existing community is caused largely by any other external condition and not by the existing organism. And such a course is called or referred to as allogenic succession. More about autotrophic succession. It is characterized by early and continued dominance of autotrophic organisms like green plants. It begins in a predominantly inorganic environment and the energy flow is maintained indefinitely. There is a gradual increase in organic matter content supported by energy flow. Next is the heterotrophic succession. It is characterized by early dominance of heterotrophs such as bacteria, actinomycetes, fungi and animals. It begins in a predominantly organic environment and there is a progressive decline in the energy content. So, hydrosere, that is the ecological succession in water, is depicted in this figure exhibiting a different stages in the they are called as seral stages. So, first and foremost is the deep fresh water where no rooted plants because of lack of light in deep water pioneer community, only microorganisms and the phytoplanktons will be seen as the first stage. The second are the colonizing phytoplanktons developed by wind dispersed spores. When they die, they sink to bottom forming humus. In turn forms mud that builds up at the bottom. So, this is called a submerged stage. Third one is called floating stage, where as mud builds up at the bottom, it allows rooted plants to grow, in turn submerged species. Their growth results in more detritus. The fourth one is called reed swamp stage. Eventually, the sediment rises out of water to form waterlogged soil. Reed grasses and sedges colonize to form reed marsh. Their roots bind mud to form semi-solid soil and dry soil. And the fifth one being the woodland stage is a climax stage. As the soil dries, it can be colonized by more terrestrial species. The herbs replace the marsh vegetation, then shrubs replace the herbs, and eventually trees replace the shrubs. So once again, a detailed account of hydrosere, which is the primary succession in sequences which develop in aquatic environments such as lakes and ponds. It results in the conversion of water body and its community into a land community. So here the various stages of succession once again in hydrosere are as follows. The phytoplankton stage, it starts with the formation of pioneer community due to germination of encysted spores reached through wind or animals. It includes minute autotrophic diatoms, phytoflagellates, etc. After decaying, they mix with silts and forms soft mud. The second stage is called rooted submerged stage. Sorry, there was some disturbance here. You can mention under the rooted submerged stage, due to death and decay of rooted submerged hydrophytes like Hydrilla, Vallisneria, etc., and deposition of sand and silt, there is a slow rise in the bottom level, that is soil layer of the pond, which buried older plants. They form good humus. Then here you can mention some plants like typhar cattails, reed grass, sedges invade the pond and later are gradually replaced by mesic communities as the water depth is reduced greatly. Gradually, land plants such as shrubs, that is salix and cornus, and trees invade, ending in the climax community such as the deciduous forests. In association with the changes in water depth and vegetation, the aquatic fauna also change and ultimately gets replaced by the land animals. Thus, the probable trend of succession in the aquatic environment is as follows. Starting with the phytoplanktons, rooted and aquatic plants, free floating and rooted plants, reeds and sedges, mesic community, terrestrial community, deciduous forest, and the climax community. So the explanation goes once again like this. The next stage is called rooted floating stage, where the floating plants like Nymphia, Trapa, then Monocoria, etc. appear, helping water to become rich in mineral and organic matter. Later, free-floating plants like Azolla, etc. also grows. This increase the bottom layers of the pond and makes water shallower. The next stage is called reed swamp stage. Here, the floating plants are replaced by other plants like Typha, Scirpus, etc., which produce organic waste and lose huge amount of water by transpiration. It increases substratum of the pond and becomes unsuitable for growth of amphibious plants. It's also called amphibious stage. Sedge meadow stage, also called as marsh meadow stage, where plant species like carex, juncus, and herbs develops, forming mat-like vegetation with the branched rhizomatous system. It may disappear due to the development of mesic conditions. Then woodland stage is where the soil remains drier for most of the time and becomes suitable for the development of wet woodland, that is shrubs and trees such as willow, alders, etc., it lowers the water table by transpiration, building up the soil and accumulation of humus with associated microorganisms. Finally, the forest stage is the development of climax community, which is greatly influenced by climatic conditions like a trophic rainforest in areas with heavy rainfall, mixed forest in temperate regions, etc. So, in a nutshell about hydrosere, you can explain it as a simply a succession which starts in water, a wetland which is a transitional area between open fresh water and dry land. It provides a good example of this and is an excellent place to see several stages of hydrosere at the same time. In time, an area of open fresh water such as lake will naturally dry out, ultimately becoming woodland. During this process, a range of different habitats such as swamp and marsh will succeed each other. This hydrosere succession from open water to climax woodland is likely to take at least 200 years or probably much more. Some intermediate stages will last a shorter time than others. For instance, swamp may change to marsh within a decade or less. How long it takes will depend largely on the amount of siltation occurring. So now let us discuss what is the xerosere. So in xerosere or xerarch succession begins on exposed parent rocks, that's called lithosphere, or dry sand called samosere. So a lithosere involves the following stages. You can mention the first stage is called crustose lichen stage, which is clearly seen in this particular figure. The soil is absent for the complete penetration of roots. Blue-green algae and lichens are the pioneer species. Hence, in cooler climates, crustose lichens like Rhizocarpon, Rhinodina and Lecanora are the common pioneers. They produce acids which bring about weathering of rocks. The dead organic matter of algae and lichens become mixed with the small particles of rocks to form a thin layer of moist soil on the rocks. The second stage is called foliose and fructose lichen stage, where they appear on the substratum partially built up by the crustose lichens. It includes species of Parmelia dermatocarpon which have large leaf-like thalli. The weathering of rocks mixed with humus results in the development of a fine thin soil layer on rock surface, and thus there is a change in the habitat. The third stage is called moss stage. The development of thin humus-rich soil layer on rock surface favors the growth of certain xerophytic mosses such as Grimmia, Tortula, Polytrichum, etc. The fourth stage is called herb stage, and due to the extensive growth of mosses, more soil accumulates. Minerals are added to it due to leaching. This favors the growth of some herbaceous plants like Aristida, Festuca, Justicia, Tridax, etc. The fifth stage in xerosere is the shrub stage. Due to much accumulation of soil, the habitat becomes suitable for shrubs. Species of Rus, Phytocarpus, Ziziphus, etc. dominate this stage. The shrubs overshadow the herbaceous vegetation and produce more organic matter. The final or climax stage is called the forest stage, which is the sixth stage. It represents the climax community. Due to the weathering of rocks, thin layer of soil is formed which supports small trees like acacia, prosopis and boswellia, etc. Plants require high rainfall to reach climax stage. In moist and wet climates and also in temperate climates, dense climax forest is developed. So, in case of this xeric habitat, the pioneer plants are lichens. Mosses and selaginella, which help in soil formation by accelerating erosion. In course of time, grasses, animals and herbs started to grow on the soil and deposited on rocks. Finally, trees starts growing. The pioneer animals of the lichen stage are few species of ants, mites, then spiders, etc. These animals are exposed to harsh environment such as extreme fluctuations in temperature. During the moss stage, many new species of small mites, spiders, springtails, tardigrades, etc. invade. The herb stage is characterized by nematodes, ants, insects, larvae, etc. So, during the shrub and forest stages, great qualitative and quantitative modifications occur in the fauna. Thus, there occurs numerous kinds of animals such as slugs, snails, wireworms, centipedes, mites, ants, snowbugs, amphibians such as salamanders, frog, etc., reptiles such as turtles, lizards, snakes, birds such as flycatchers, grouse, then mammals such as moles, mouse, shrews, squirrels, fox, and chipmunks, etc., will be present or found during the period of Xeroseric succession. So, now finally, let's move to the outcome of the study. What have you studied about the ecological succession? So, ecological succession, as we all know now, as the gradual process by which ecosystems change and develop over time. The main causes of ecological succession include the biotic and climatic factors that can destroy the populations of an area. Wind, fire, soil erosion and natural disasters include the climatic factors. There are 5 main elements to ecological succession, that is the primary succession, secondary succession, pioneer and niche species, climax communities and subclimax communities. The succession initiating in ponds, pools, lakes or elsewhere in water is called hydrosere. On the other hand, the succession beginning on the bare rock or other places where there is an extreme deficiency of water is called xerosere. So, now let's learn some of the MCQs with answers. The first one being, lichen is the pioneer vegetation on which succession? The options are A. Xerosere, B. Hydrosere, C. Samosere and D. Lithosere. So, can you guess the answer? So, the answer being answer D, that is Lithosere. Second question, during the process of succession, the reaction process refers to? Answer options are intra and interspecific competition between organisms, B. Modification of habitat by organisms, C. Community in equilibrium with the habitat and D being establishment of plants. So, the answer is the option B, where during the process of succession, reaction process refers to modification of habitat by the organisms. The third question, in general communities, early succession is dominated by? Options are opportunist species, B. fugitive species, C. species having or related life history and D is all. So, the options are here. The answer is D, you can mention. The fourth one, which one of the following decreases during ecological succession? Options are community restoration, net community production, biomass or gross production during early phase. The answer being option B, that is net community production. The next question, the pioneer community of hydrosere are? Options are phytoplanktons, sedges, mosses, or bogwood. So the answer being A, that is phytoplanktons. The next question, autotrophic succession is characterized by. Options are early and continued dominance of green plants, B, early dominance of heterotrophs, C, early dominance of decomposers, and D being none of the above. The option A is the correct answer. Next question being, reed swamp stage is seen in. Options are Xerosere, B, Hydrosere, C, Samosere, and D, Lithosere. The option B is the correct answer. Next question, the type of plant succession in which lichens forms a component is A, Xerosere, B, Hydrosere, C, Samosere, and D, Lithosere. So the option D is the correct one. Next question, both hydrarch and xerarch succession lead to A, highly dry conditions, B, xeric conditions, C, excessive wet conditions, and D being medium water conditions. So the answer is option D. And here at the end of the explanation and discussion of multiple choice questions, these are few references for you to clarify your doubts if there are any. Thank you.